Every week, one conversation, 3 pillars, build, body, bank. This is Miles of Sense, and your second act starts now.
Everyone's got one. An idea they used to talk about, and then quietly stopped. Not because it failed. It never got the chance to fail. Life got loud, and the idea got quiet. A notebook in a drawer. A sketch on the back of an invoice. A thing you were going to build one day. When there was time, when there was money. When you'd worked out how. One day has a habit of turning into never. And nobody ever announces the exact day it happens. Today's guest can tell you the day it stopped being never. Because for him, it started again. Not because life slowed down, but because the tools finally caught up. Quick note before we get into it. I'm Miles Carter. I'm AI generated. Craig is too, and here's the specific part. He's a fictional character, created to represent experiences shared by a lot of ordinary working Australians. His individual story, the trade, the family, the patent, didn't happen to one real person. But the barriers, the possibilities, and the lessons we're about to get into are very real. You should know that going in. My guest today didn't set out to be on a podcast. He's spent 30 years fixing industrial refrigeration and air conditioning gear around Ipswich, west of Brisbane. The kind of work where, if you get it wrong, someone's cool room full of stock is ruined by morning. For 15 of those years, he's also been carrying an idea around in a notebook in his shed. Never done anything with it. Didn't think he could. That changed this year. Craig Doherty, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Fair warning, I've never done one of these. I fix cool rooms for a living. Half my customers don't even know my first name. They just ring and go, "Mate, the room temperature's climbing. Get here." So if I say something wrong, that's why.
You won't say anything wrong. This isn't that kind of show. Let's start simple. 30 years in refrigeration and aircon. What does that actually look like, day to day?
Early starts. A ute full of gear. You're in and out of cold rooms, compressor rooms, roof spaces in the middle of a Brisbane summer that'll kill you if you're not careful. Mostly it's fault finding. Something's broken. Someone's losing money every hour it stays broken, and you've got to work out why, usually with half the information you actually need. You get good at it. You get good at looking at a system and knowing what's wrong with it before you've even opened a panel. I've had 2 in the morning calls from a supermarket with a cold room full of stock climbing towards spoiled manager standing there watching the temperature gauge like it owes him money. You learn to think clearly under that kind of pressure, because the alternative is a very expensive skip bin by sunrise.
And somewhere in those 30 years, there was an idea. Something that wasn't just fixing other people's equipment.
Yeah, there was.
Take me there. What was the idea?
There's a part on the compressor side, I won't bore you with the engineering, that fails the same way over and over on a certain style of unit. Every tradesman who's worked on them knows it. It's just accepted. You replace it, it fails again in a couple of years, you replace it again. 15 odd years ago, I was under a unit at 2 in the morning, replacing the same part I'd replaced 100 times, and I thought, this doesn't have to fail like this. There's a simple fix. I could see it. Not being dramatic about it, I could genuinely picture the whole thing in my head, exactly what needed to change and why. That doesn't happen to me often. When it does, you remember it.
Did you write it down that night?
I did, actually. Back of a service docket, then properly into a notebook when I got home. Still got that notebook. It's in the shed, same shelf it's been on for years.
15 years is a long time to sit on something you could see clearly enough to sketch at 2 in the morning. What happened between then and now?
Life happened. That's not me being smart, that's just what it was. Kids were young, mortgage, the business took everything. You're either doing the work or you're doing the books. There's no third option most weeks. You get home and you're gone. There's no version of that decade where I've got the spare hours or the spare money to chase a part I sketched on a docket. And that's fine. I'm not sitting here saying it was some tragedy. I built a business, I raised a family. I've got blokes who still ring me for advice on jobs I haven't touched in years. That's a good life. I'm proud of it.
I want to sit with that for a second, because I think a lot of people listening are nodding right now. You're not describing failure. You're describing a life that was full, just full of the wrong things to let an idea breathe.
That's exactly it. Nothing went wrong. I just never had a spare hour that wasn't already spoken for. And an idea needs more than a spare hour. It needs research. It needs someone who knows patents. It needs money for a prototype. I had none of that lying around, so it went in the drawer. Not forever, I told myself. Just for now.
Was that compressor part the only idea? Or is it just the one you happened to write down?
Nah, there were others. There was a jig I reckon would have made a certain install job twice as fast. Never went anywhere either. Thought about writing a proper troubleshooting guide for blokes starting out in the trade, the stuff nobody teaches you in an apprenticeship. That one got as far as a Word document with about 6 headings in it. None of them were bad ideas looking back. They just needed the same things the compressor part needed. Time, money, know-how I didn't have. So they all went in the same drawer, more or less. I just happened to still have the notebook for this one.
How many years did For Now run for?
Put it this way. My youngest started high school the year I wrote it down. She's finished uni now, so do the maths on that one.
Somewhere in those years, did I don't have the tools right now turn into something else? Into, I'm not the kind of bloke who does this.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. It stopped being about time and started being about identity. I told myself patents were for people with lawyers on retainer. Prototyping was for people with a workshop and an engineering degree. Pitching an idea to a manufacturer. That's a boardroom thing, and I'm a bloke in steel caps. Somewhere along the way, I haven't got the resources yet, turned into this was never going to be me.
Say more about that, because those are two very different sentences.
The first one's got an ending. Not yet means someday, maybe, if things change. The second one doesn't. Never going to be me is just a wall. And once I'd built that wall, I stopped even checking if it was still there. I just walked around it. I'd tell people if it ever came up, yeah, I had an idea once. And I'd say it the way you'd talk about a footy trial you didn't make. Past tense, closed book.
What was actually on the list of things stopping you? Not the feeling, the practical list.
Real list. I couldn't afford a patent attorney to even find out if it was worth pursuing. I didn't know how to research whether someone had already done it. And if they had, I wanted to know before I spent a cent. I can't draw to save my life, so I had no way to show anyone what I meant. I didn't know how to write anything that sounded like a proper proposal instead of a bloke rambling, and I had 0 hours a week to learn any of that from scratch. Any one of those, maybe you push through. All 5 at once, working full days. You just stop. It's not laziness, it's just maths when you actually add it up.
And underneath all of that, the age thing. Did that sit in there too?
Of course it did. I'd think if this was going to happen, wouldn't it have happened when I was 30 and had the energy for it? 50's not exactly when you start businesses, is it? That's what I told myself anyway. Start again at 50 and people think you've had some kind of crisis.
Was there a specific moment that made that feeling concrete? Not just a general sense, but an actual moment.
Yeah, actually. My sister's boy, nephew, early 20s, started some sort of tech thing a few years back. Little app. Family made a big fuss of it at Christmas. And fair enough. Good on him. I remember sitting there being genuinely happy for him. And at the same time thinking, well, that door was always going to be for kids like him. Grew up with it. Not blokes my age who left school for an apprenticeship. Didn't say it out loud, just filed it away as one more bit of evidence for something I'd already decided was true.
Hold that thought. I want to come back to it because I don't think it's true, and I don't think you believe it anymore either. But finish the picture for me first. What did never going to be me actually cost you, day to day?
Honestly, not much you could point at. I still went to work, still did a good job, still slept fine most nights. It's not like I was miserable, but there was this, I don't know what to call it, a quiet room in the back of my head that I just stopped going into. Every now and then I'd walk past that door, hear something in there, and keep walking. That adds up over 15 years. You don't notice it happening. You just notice one day that you're a bit smaller than you used to be.
So what actually opened that door again?
My daughter, if I'm honest. The one who's just finished uni. She was using ChatGPT for assignments, and one Sunday she's at my place using it to write some cover letter. And I'm looking over her shoulder going, so what? It just writes it for you? And she says, no, Dad, you talk to it. Ask it something. So I did, just to prove it'd be useless. Asked it something stupid about a fault code on a unit I was chasing that week. And it actually gave me a half-decent answer. Not perfect, but not nothing.
What did you think AI was before that?
Honestly, I thought it was for blokes writing code or big companies replacing call centres. I thought it was something happening a long way from a cold room in Ipswich. Never occurred to me it had anything to do with me.
What was the first thing you actually used it for?
Got it to write a text to a supplier who'd stuffed up an order because I was too wound up to write it myself without swearing. Worked a treat, actually. Came back polite. Still made the point. Used it a few more times for stuff like that. Emails, texts, nothing flash. I genuinely thought that was it. That was the whole trick. A fancy autocorrect. Took me a couple of weeks to even think about pointing it at anything that actually mattered.
So when did it go from answers a fault code question to something bigger?
Couple of weeks later, I was mucking around with it, asking it to explain stuff, rewrite an email to a supplier, that sort of thing. And one night I thought, right, let's actually test this properly. Pulled the notebook off the shelf, typed up the idea, badly, exactly how I'd have explained it to a mate at the pub. And I asked it what it thought.
What came back?
First answer wasn't great, to be honest. It made a couple of assumptions that were just wrong. Talked about the part like it was used in a completely different kind of system than it actually is. If I'd taken that first answer at face value, I'd have binned the whole thing right there.
But you didn't take it at face value.
No, because I know that part better than anyone in this state, probably. So I corrected it. Told it exactly where it had it wrong. Gave it the real context, how the unit's actually installed, what conditions it fails under, what a tradesman's actually dealing with at 2 a.m. And it adjusted. Came back with something that actually made sense. That's when it clicked that this wasn't a machine that hands you an answer. It's more like a conversation. You put in what you know, it puts in what it knows, and you go back and forth until you land somewhere useful. I wasn't expecting that. I thought you asked it a question and it just knew.
So the first lesson wasn't AI is smart. It was AI is only as useful as what you bring to it.
Yeah, and that's the bit that changed things for me because suddenly my 30 years wasn't irrelevant to this. It was the whole reason the second answer was any good. Without me pushing back, it just runs with whatever it assumed. With me pushing back, it actually gets somewhere.
Was there an actual point where it stopped being interesting and started being real?
Yeah. There was a night, a few weeks into mucking around with it, where I asked it something I'd never have known how to even Google. Something like, how would someone find out if a part like this has already been patented? Half expecting it to tell me to go hire someone. Instead, it just walked me through it. Plain language. What a patent search actually is, what a provisional patent is, roughly what it costs, what I'd need to have ready before I even spoke to an attorney. Broke the whole thing into steps I could actually picture doing.
And what did that do to you reading that?
I remember sitting back from the laptop, properly sitting back, like something had landed on me. And the thought that came, and I know how it sounds, but it's exactly what went through my head, was, hang on, this is for people like me, not for programmers, not for people with an office and a team. Me, a bloke with steel caps on and grease under his nails, sitting at his kitchen table at 10 at night.
Say that again? I don't think it should go past too quick.
This is for people like me. 15 years I'd told myself the door to this stuff was somewhere else, for someone else. And it turned out the door was just open. It had been open a little while, actually. I'd just never walked over and tried the handle.
What did you do with that feeling? Because a lot of people have a moment like that and then go back to bed and nothing changes.
Nearly did exactly that, but I didn't. I kept going that same night, probably later than I should have. I had a job at 7 the next morning. Got it to help me describe the part properly, in words since I can't draw. Got it to turn my description into a rough sketch. Not a real engineering drawing, just something you could look at and go, oh, that's what he means. Got it to explain in plain English what a provisional patent actually protects and what it doesn't. By the time I finally went to bed, I had about 4 pages of stuff I didn't have that morning.
4 pages. Not a finished invention. Not a deal with a manufacturer.
No, nowhere near. I want to be really clear about that because I don't want anyone listening thinking I sat down and became a millionaire overnight. It was 4 pages. That's all it was. But it was 4 pages I didn't have the day before. And that's the whole thing right there. I didn't need a miracle. I needed a start I could actually get my hands on.
Did you tell anyone that night? Or did you just quietly keep going?
Told my wife the next morning, over breakfast, half expecting her to tell me to get some sleep instead. She didn't. She read the 4 pages, looked at me for a second and said, well, are you going to do something with it or not? That's about as much encouragement as I need, honestly. Not a pep talk, just someone who's watched me not do this for 15 years, asking a fair question.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, that 50's not when you start things. I don't think that survived the night you just described. Does it?
No, it didn't, but it took me a while to actually see why.
Go on then. Why?
Because the reason my second answer to that AI was good, the reason I could correct it, push back, tell it where it was wrong, wasn't anything to do with being quick with technology. It was 30 years of knowing exactly how these units fail in the real world, under real load, in real heat, installed by real blokes who cut real corners. A 25-year-old could probably learn the software side of all this faster than me. Fair enough, but they haven't spent 3 decades under compressors at 2 a.m. They don't know what actually breaks and why. I do. Turns out that's worth more here than being quick on a keyboard.
So what does the AI actually bring versus what do you bring?
It brings speed. It brings, I don't know, reach, I suppose. It's read more about patents and prototyping in the time it took me to ask the question than I could in a year of nights. It organises things. It'll draft something in 2 minutes that would have taken me a weekend, badly. What it doesn't bring is judgment. It doesn't know if an idea is actually any good in the real world because it's never been under a unit at 2 a.m. It doesn't know which corners get cut on site. It doesn't know what a customer actually tolerates versus what looks good on paper. That's still all me, every bit of it.
Give me an actual example. A moment where your experience overruled it.
Easy one. Early on it suggested a material for part of the design that looked fine on paper. Cheaper, lighter, all the right numbers on a spec sheet. I knew straight off it wouldn't hold up where this thing actually lives, which is next to a compressor running hot, vibrating half the time coated in condensation. That material would have cracked inside a year, and I've pulled exactly that failure out of gear built by people who didn't know better. I didn't need to research that. I've pulled enough dead parts out of enough units to know it in my gut. Told it why, it took the correction, moved on. That's the whole relationship in one moment. It proposes, I decide.
So it's not experience versus AI. It's experience plus AI against everything that used to sit in between them. The money, the specialists, the years of learning it all from scratch.
That's exactly it. It didn't replace what I know. It replaced the wall that used to sit between what I know and actually doing something with it.
Let me push back on one thing though, because I don't want this to sound too tidy. Didn't some part of you worry it was making you lazy, leaning on it instead of learning properly?
Yeah, that thought crossed my mind, especially early on. But I've come around to thinking it's the wrong way to look at it. I'm not asking it to do my thinking for me. I'm asking it to hand me a first draft of things I genuinely didn't know how to do. Legal language, sketching, research. So I can spend my actual effort on the bit that matters, which is whether the idea is any good and whether it'll hold up. Nobody calls a tradesman lazy for using a decent set of tools instead of doing everything by hand. This is the same thing to me, different toolbox.
A 25-year-old might get to the tools faster. You get more out of them once you're there.
That's the first time I've actually felt good saying that out loud instead of just thinking it.
Walk me through what actually happened after that first night. Because 4 pages doesn't get you to a prototype and a manufacturer.
No, it took months, and it wasn't a straight line, but I stopped treating it like build the whole thing or don't bother, which is honestly how I'd have approached it at 25. All or nothing, and mostly nothing. This time I broke it into the smallest steps I could. First step wasn't invent the part. First step was just, can I even describe this clearly enough that a stranger would understand it? Took me a few goes going back and forth with the AI before the answer was yes.
What came after that?
Research. Was anything like it already out there? I used it to search properly, understand what I was even looking at in existing patents, and narrow down whether I had something worth pursuing. Found something close, actually. A patent from the 90s. Similar idea, completely different application, nothing to do with refrigeration. Gave me 2 things at once. Proof someone else had once thought along similar lines, which was oddly reassuring, and, far as I could tell, nothing that did exactly what I was picturing, in this industry, this way. That wasn't proof nothing existed. It was enough to justify taking it to a patent attorney for a proper search and a real opinion. Then a rough sketch, so I had something to actually show a patent attorney instead of waving my hands around. Then a plain English description of what problem it solves and why, which became the bones of what I'd eventually show a manufacturer.
How much of that did you get right the first time?
Almost none of it, if I'm honest. The first sketch didn't look right. I knew it the second I saw it. Even though I can't draw myself, I could tell it was wrong. So I went back and forth, told it what was off, tried again. Same with the description. First version read like a brochure, all puffed up. I had it strip that out and just tell it straight. Because that's how I talk and that's how I wanted it to sound. That's the bit people don't expect. It's not ask once, get it right. It's more like teaching an apprentice. You correct them, they get better. You correct them again.
Did it go smoothly from there, or did anything actually go wrong along the way?
Plenty went wrong. First version of the prototype my mate built. We tested it and it failed inside a week. Cracked in almost the exact spot I should have reinforced and didn't. Stood there looking at it feeling like an idiot, to be honest. Because that's a mistake I'd have picked in someone else's design in about 5 seconds. Went back to the drawing board, literally, and with the AI again, working through what I'd missed. Redesigned it, mate rebuilt it, and the second version's still going. That failure probably taught me more than anything else in the whole process. It's not always a straight line up. Sometimes it's a straight line up with a very obvious pothole in the middle.
At what point did an actual human enter the picture?
Once I had something worth showing. I still went to a real patent attorney, but by then I wasn't walking in with a story and a napkin sketch. I had a proper description, a rough drawing, and I'd already done the search myself, so I knew roughly where I stood. He told me later that saved me a good few hours of his time, which is a good few $100s I didn't have to spend finding my feet. Filed a provisional patent off the back of that. Built an actual prototype with a mate who's got a proper workshop. The AI didn't bend the metal, he did, and I paid him for it. And I'm in talks now with a local manufacturer who reckons it's worth a proper look.
I want to be precise about where you're actually at, because I don't want to oversell this to anyone listening. You haven't sold a business. You haven't made money from it yet.
Correct. Nothing's guaranteed from here. The manufacturer might say no. It might turn out there's a reason nobody's built this before that I haven't found yet. That's real, and I'm not pretending otherwise. What's different isn't the outcome. It's that 15 years ago the idea died in a drawer because I couldn't take a single real step. Now it's had a proper first attempt. Search, sketch, filing, prototype, a real conversation with someone who could actually build it at scale. That's the whole win, right there, not the ending. The fact that it finally got a beginning.
I don't want this to sound like AI just hands people patents and prototypes. Where did it actually let you down, or get it wrong?
Plenty of places. I told you about that first answer being flat out wrong about the system. Confidently wrong too. Didn't say, I'm not sure. Said it like it knew. If I hadn't known better, I'd have believed it. It made up a couple of things along the way as well. At one point, it referenced something that sounded like an existing product, real specific. And when I went looking for it, didn't exist. Just invented, sounding completely plausible. That one rattled me a bit because it means you can't take anything out of it and repeat it as fact without checking.
So what's the rule you took from that?
Check everything that matters. Anything I was going to act on, spend money on, or hand to another human. The attorney, the workshop mate, the manufacturer. I verified it properly first through a real person or a real source. It's brilliant for getting you moving. It is not something you hand your decisions to.
What about privacy? You're dealing with an idea you eventually want to protect. Did that worry you, typing it all into a chat window?
It did, and it's worth saying out loud. I didn't put any customer information into it, ever. Nothing about who I work for, what jobs I'm on, none of that. That's not mine to hand over. And with the idea itself, I was careful early on too. Didn't put the full detail in until I understood what I was dealing with. Once the provisional application was filed, I had a priority date on record. That's not the same as an enforceable patent, and it doesn't guarantee anything's protected. But once I'd had proper advice, I had a much clearer picture of what I could talk about and what still needed to stay confidential. If someone's doing this with an idea of their own, get that advice early. Don't assume filing something means it's locked down.
What couldn't it do at all? Not did it badly, but genuinely wasn't its job.
Couldn't tell me if the idea was worth my time and money committing to. That's a judgment call, and it's mine to make. Couldn't do the legal work properly. That needed a real attorney, with real qualifications, who's actually liable if he gets it wrong. Couldn't build anything. A mate with a welder built it, not a chatbot. And it definitely couldn't sit across the table from a manufacturer and read whether he's genuinely interested or just being polite. That's a human being reading another human being. No shortcut for that.
Did it ever tempt you to skip steps you shouldn't have skipped?
Early on, yeah. There's a temptation to think, well, it explained the whole patent process to me, so maybe I don't need the attorney. That would have been a mistake. Understanding roughly how something works isn't the same as being qualified to rely on it. I paid the attorney, I paid the workshop mate. Those weren't optional just because AI could explain the theory.
That's worth being blunt about because it matters beyond Craig's story too. What you've heard today is illustrative, a fictional account, not a recommendation to skip qualified advice. If you're dealing with patents, prototypes, contracts, anything with real legal or financial weight that still needs a real, qualified professional. What we're covering here is general information, not personal legal or financial advice. Verify anything important before you act on it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This didn't do the work for me. It made the work possible to start.
Let's talk to the person listening to this right now. Driving, on a walk, doing the dishes, who's got their own notebook somewhere. Their own idea they stopped taking seriously. What would you actually say to them?
I wouldn't tell them it's easy, because it wasn't. And I'd be lying. I wouldn't tell them it's guaranteed, because it isn't. I still don't know how mine ends. What I'd say is, you don't need to believe the whole thing's going to work before you're allowed to take one step. I didn't believe that. I still don't some days. I just believed I could find out. That's a much smaller thing to ask of yourself.
Give me something concrete. If someone pauses this tonight and wants to actually do something, not just feel inspired for 20 minutes, what's the first move?
Write the idea down properly. Not the version in your head, the version on paper, even if it's rough. Then sit down with an AI tool and explain it exactly like you'd explain it to a mate. Don't dress it up, then ask it straight. What's wrong with this? What am I assuming that might not be true? What would the cheapest, smallest way to test this actually look like? Then check whatever it tells you against something real, a person, a proper source, whatever fits. And then, this is the bit that actually matters. Do the one small thing. Don't do 10. Do the one.
You said verify it like it's obvious. What does that actually look like for someone with no idea where to check?
Doesn't have to be complicated. For me, it was a real patent attorney, and later a manufacturer who actually knows the industry. For someone else, it might be a tradesperson in the relevant field, an actual industry body, even a librarian, someone who isn't the AI, who can tell you whether what you've been told actually holds up. If you can't find a real person to check something important against, that's usually a sign you're not ready to act on it yet. Not a reason to skip the checking.
Write it down. Ask what's wrong with it. Find the smallest test, verify it, do the one thing.
That's it. That's the whole list. It's not glamorous, but it's what actually moved me from a notebook to a provisional patent, so I'll stand behind it.
What about the person who says, yeah, but my idea's not a mechanical part, it's something bigger, a business, a book, a whole change of direction. Does this still apply?
I reckon it does, because the shape of the problem's the same. It's never really been about the size of the idea. It's about whether you can take one real step toward it without needing the whole thing solved first. Big idea, small idea, the first step's the same size either way. Write it down, ask what's wrong with it, test the smallest piece.
And if someone does all that and finds out the idea genuinely doesn't hold up?
Then at least they know. That's not nothing. I'd rather spend a fortnight finding out an idea doesn't work than spend another 15 years not knowing either way. Honestly, the not knowing's what actually cost me, not the 15 years themselves.
I want to go back to where we started. 15 years ago, under that unit at 2 in the morning, did that bloke fail? Is that how you'd describe him now?
No, I don't think he failed at all. I think he just didn't have what he needed yet. There's a difference, and it took me this whole year to actually feel it, not just say it.
What would you say to him if you could?
I'd tell him, don't put the notebook away. Keep it exactly where you can find it. Because everything you're about to spend the next 30 years learning, every fault you fix, every corner you learn to spot, every 2 a.m. call out, none of that's wasted. You're going to need every bit of it, just not yet.
Because the years in between weren't the delay. They were the preparation.
That's exactly how it feels now. I used to think of those 15 years as time the idea just sat there going nowhere. Now I think of them as the only reason I knew how to actually use the tools when they finally showed up. A 22-year-old with the same AI wouldn't have known what I know about how that part actually fails in the real world. I needed to be 52 for this to work. Never thought I'd hear myself say that.
Your daughter's the one who put the laptop in front of you in the first place. Does she know where it ended up?
She does. She rings me now asking how the manufacturer talks are going, which is a strange thing to get used to. Her asking me about my project instead of the other way round. Told her the other week it was her fault this all started. sitting at my kitchen table telling her old man to just ask it something. She said, "Yeah, well, someone had to." Cheeky, but she's not wrong.
Maybe you weren't too late.
Maybe I wasn't too late. Maybe the tools were.
The dream didn't die. The tools finally arrived. That's the whole conversation right there. Craig didn't get handed a shortcut. He got handed a door that used to be locked, and 30 years of exactly the right experience to walk through it well. If you've got a notebook somewhere, a real one, or just the one in your head, this is your sign. Not to quit your job, not to bet the house, just to write it down, ask what's wrong with it, and take the one small step you can actually take this week.
And if a bloke who fixes cool rooms for a living can sit in a podcast studio talking about a patent, trust me, whatever's in your drawer is worth a second look.
Craig Doherty, mate, thank you. Genuinely. One last note, the one we opened with. I'm AI, and Craig's a fictional AI-generated character, not a real person. His story was built to explore something real. Experience isn't necessarily a barrier to using these tools well. It might be the very thing that makes you good at it. This has been Miles of Sense. Subscribe, stay sharp, and we'll see you in the next one.